Riviera, one of the tuned cars from Buick. Styling, performance, ride and handling, all tuned to work together. Riviera. See and test drive it now at your Buick dealers.
When the Buick Riviera came out, it was a design masterpiece and an instant classic. But over the years, the styling changed for better or really for worse. By the late 1960s, Buick's flagship was in need of a radical refresh, one that would bring back the magic of the first Riviera. Welcome everyone to episode 76 of the Automotive History series, where we take a boat ride through the history of the Buick Riviera Boattail.
Wouldn't you really rather have a Buick? Buick, the tuned car.
When plushier cars are built, Buick will build them.
Ever heard of this thing called a personal luxury car? Don't worry if you haven't, because the Ford Thunderbird has all the answers to your questions. A large two-door coupe with a stylish exterior and long option list interior, to really personalize it and make it your own. The Thunderbird laid the foundations of a market segment back in the 1950s and continued to have the entire market segment to its own, as it was practically the only one. Now, this didn't sit well with rivaling General Motors. Sure, it tried to enter the market with a few stylish special editions for regular passenger cars, but there wasn't quite a model with styling that was radically different than the rest of the lineup at the showroom floor. And this had to change. So around 1960, GM commenced with the project internally known as XP175, but was quickly dubbed the Cadillac LaSalle project. The general idea was that Cadillac would be the first of GM's divisions to receive a top-of-the-line Halo model with distinct styling, which was a personal luxury car. The story goes Cadillac didn't feel the need to add such a car to the lineup, and the design was then passed around to the other divisions. It was there that Buick, desperate to increase sales, said, "Sure, I'll take it," and the rest is history. Buick introduced for 1963 the Buick Riviera. I've talked about it before, but design-wise the car was a full 5 years ahead of the competition, with its pronounced beltline and so-called Coke bottle styling. For reference, if the average American car in the early 60s just shook off the gaudy tail fins and reached peak boxiness by the mid-60s before featuring some curves by the late 60s, the Riviera skips this process entirely and goes straight to late 60s styling. It's a design masterpiece, American style with a slight touch of European elegance. In fact, the underlying idea was to create a design that was a mix of the sporty styling of a Ferrari matched with the stately styling of a Rolls-Royce. Pretty much two cars that were the absolute opposites of each other when it comes to styling. And although I don't see any of this, I do see it as a distinctly American design and one of the best from the 1960s, although it's that sharp and formal roof that's somewhat of a reference to the Hooper-bodied Rolls-Royces. But the ultimate year for the first generation Riviera has to be the 1965 model year. That's the one and only year the headlights were moved from in the grille to the outer front fenders, hidden away and only opened by clamshell trim pieces. This is what the original design should have been. It looks so cool, opening the headlights, and gives that car such a menacing look. 1965 was also the year of the introduction of a 360 horsepower Grand Sport package, pushing the Riviera dangerously close into Grand Tourer territory.
Then don't overlook the Buick Riviera.
But sales were slowing down, and after 3 years it was time for a full redesign. As much as the styling of the Riviera was praised, it was also a stylistic dead end. The Riviera didn't really look a lot like Buick's other models, and here is where you really see it was initially meant to be a Cadillac. And so a redesign followed in 1966. As with a lot of things in life, when the first version is so good and so pure, it's hard to make the second version even better and expand on it. Although sales increased, and the second generation Riviera certainly looks unique and very stylish, it's that front end that's a bit different. It still has the hidden headlights, but you can't really tell where they are hidden, unless you know it. Take a friend that doesn't know a whole lot about American cars to a car show and ask him where the headlights are, and they'll most likely point to the glass on the outer corners, which are in fact the turn signals. When the headlights are activated, it's like the grille is a bit too narrow and the front fenders with the turning lights are a bit too big, like two large rudimentary appendages. Still, the rest of the car is a solid 10 out of 10. But even then, styling-wise, it was downhill from here. The 1968 refresh retained much of the design, but the front-end styling became even more flat and anonymous, losing depth. And for 1970, it looks like the entire car was given a redesign, but it still used the same basic body shell, but it was cleverly disguised. The rear-end styling and the roof that slopes down is absolutely wonderful, but the car certainly stepped away from being a sleek and sporty coupe to yet another brougham-tastic boat that gained an extra few pounds here and there. The front end is a more generic, which lost the hidden headlights action, replaced by the typical standard dual headlight setup. And let's just say that the spirit animal for the design of this car was, it was a whale.
You know, the boys in Flint, Michigan take a lot of pride in this car.
It's the late 1960s, time for a new generation of the 1971 Riviera, and a perfect moment to evaluate where the styling was heading in the last couple of years and what could be done to bring back the Riviera to its roots. And so enter into the picture Bill Mitchell. Bill was the big boss of GM's styling department throughout the 60s and the 70s, and the successor of Harley Earl, the man that pretty much invented the styling department for car companies. Bill wasn't directly responsible for the design of every GM car that came out during the 1960s, but he did certainly have overarching ideas for car styling, best described by such words as the sheer look, sharp, Coke bottle, bladed, beveled, and a W shape? Allow me to explain these terms by looking at some of the greatest examples of the Bill Mitchell era. First of all, pretty much every GM car from the 60s is graced by a pointy hood and front end, making a V shape that breaks up the light. No, seriously, with the right proper lighting from the front it almost looked like the car came in two colors. Some of the cars were given equally bladed front fenders that also stick out, usually in the same line of the center point of the grille and the hood. What is then created is the so-called W shape if you look at the car from above. A great example is the 1966 Buick Riviera, but also the 1966 Buick Wildcat, where the front and rear end styling follow a similar pattern. The outer fenders stick out, the area surrounding the head and tail lines move inward, and then as we move to the center of the car, both trunk and grille stick out again. As an added bonus, the beveled shapes are also applied to the grille in the Wildcat. Then there was the Coke bottle styling, looking like a bottle of Coke lying on its side. This styling was mostly applied to the more sporty models, as it gives the car a muscular look if you slightly raise the front and rear fenders above the overall belt line. It adds something graceful to an otherwise sharp body, and a great example is, of course, the Chevrolet Corvette, but also more subtly found on cars like the Cadillac Eldorado and the Pontiac Grand Prix. Another design trick is to put the front and rear fenders on a slight angle, to give the car a swift appearance, like it hunches forward even when standing still, like the original Riviera, but also the Pontiac GTO. And that's pretty much in a nutshell the Bill Mitchell school of styling. Now, knowing all this, Bill's latest inspiration came from cars he grew up with, the big and almighty speedsters from the 1930s, that typically featured similar styling themes, albeit a bit more rounded. These speedsters also came with something most cars didn't have, a Boattail, a tapered and sharp-lined V-shape on the back. And this would be the starting point for our upcoming Riviera.
Well, that's it, and I think you'll agree she's a smoothie. We'll be right back in 1 minute.
edsautoreviews proudly presents Ed's Automotive Art Emporium, the official merch store. That's right, over at Ed's Emporium, you can find the finest in automotive art made by yours truly. Whether it's a plate you want to hang on your wall in your home or garage, or magnets and stickers that you want to stick on the rear bumper of your classic ride, or expand your wardrobe with some car-themed apparel, I'm sure you're gonna love these designs. All designs are made by me and my own ideas, no AI trickery involved, for classic car owners that can handle a joke, and more designs get added along the way. By buying an artwork, you get to hang something nice on your wall, and I get to work on my retirement plans. So visit your local Ed's Automotive Art Emporium by searching for edsautoreviews.dashery.com or click the link in the description and get your awesome automotive art today.
Top of the Buick totem pole, the Riviera. It's all new from bumper to bumper.
Bill wanted to build the ultimate Mitchell machine. The new Riviera for 71 would be his magnum opus. Like I said, for the styling of this car, Bill was inspired by the marvelous speedsters and coach-built cars of the 1930s, and their Boattails in particular. And granted, Bill managed to pull this trick before. The legendary 1963 Corvette already featured a massive Boattail-inspired fastback. Not exactly throwback styling to the 1930s, but certainly very sleek and sporty looking. Then there were a few other cars during the 60s that featured similar styling, but it wasn't quite the same as what Bill had in mind. He wanted the real deal, a massive Boattail on a Buick. And here is one of the first styling exercises, dating from 1968. Let's unpack what we see here. First of all, it's that unique shape, where the roof slopes down in an unbroken line to the rear of the car and essentially sweeps back to the front. The body and roof almost come together at the C-pillar. There are only a few cars out there with a similar shape, like the Citroën SM, which I consider to be the closest thing to a European Riviera Boattail. Then there is the side window and greenhouse design, with the C-pillar curved in such a way that it's a reference to the coach-built cars from the 1930s, but also to pronounce the curved beltline over the rear wheel arches even more. It's almost like the body is pushed out of the wheel wells. This line is even more accentuated as it's part of another Buick styling hallmark, the sweep spear. The sweep spear is a line that goes over the front wheels, slowly dips down and then jumps up again over the rear wheels, a reference to the sweep spears on many Buicks of the late 40s and 50s. And then there is that front end, typical Bill and typical Buick. Sheer look, beveled and bladed, both horizontally and vertically, as the lower section of the front end leans forward, but the top half of the hood leans backwards. And then there is that pointy bladed beak. If Thunderbirds can have beaks, so this Buick can. And so we get to the rear. Notice whereas the Boattail on the Corvette stops at the end of the car, here is where it pushes into a pronounced tail, or backwards beak if you like. A pointy rear end, joined by the typical Mitchell design ideas. The W shape is once again strong with this one. Outer corners of the rear fenders stick out, followed by a body panel with the dual tail lights that move inwards, and then the center section, or tail, that sticks out again.
All this extravagance was mounted on top of a 122-inch wheelbase.
Designing of the Riviera was well underway when some unfortunate news was passed along. See, the original Riviera sat on the GM E platform, also nicknamed the E-body. This platform was specifically designed for GM's personal luxury cars, such as the Riviera, as well as its sisters, the Oldsmobile Tornado and the Cadillac Eldorado. Each of these cars might look entirely different and unique, but share more body parts than you think. Bill ordered that in order to make the new Riviera look more slim and sporty, it would be based on the GM A platform. The A platform was the mid-sized or intermediate platform. Such cars as the Chevrolet Chevelle and the Oldsmobile Cutlass were A-body cars. But GM's GM, that's General Management, caught wind of Bill's personal passion project and found out it would cost a whole lot to build a car with its many complex shapes and original body parts that were not shared by any other car. One particular manager and part-time bean counter was heavily opposed to this passion project, in order that the development of the Riviera and eventual production could happen, but only if the design moved or used parts of the GM B platform instead of the A platform. The B platform was among the oldest within GM and forms the basis for countless full-size models, like the Chevrolet Caprice. Now, if the Riviera would move from the mid-sized A-body to the full-size B-body, it would mean that it could share some standard parts with other existing car models, but all magic would be lost. Bill feared that stretching the car, making it bigger and longer, would be disastrous for the styling. It would turn out to be an oddball with odd proportions. And so some heavy discussions followed with upper management, but in the days of cost saving because of new developments, the choice was simple. Either move to the B-body or you won't have a Riviera at all. And so the design was changed. Here are some pictures that show the comparison between the original A-body idea and the scale up to the larger B-body. As you can see, the new Riviera is just a bit taller, a bit longer, a bit bigger, and slightly less dramatic. Partly because the C-pillar is changed to be more formal and upright than dramatic. And so, with no time to lose, some last design choices were made, and the new and dramatic, but slightly less dramatic, Riviera went on sale for the 1971 model year.
From a styling standpoint, it's clean, original. When you spot it on the road, you don't associate it with any other car.
And here it is. I trust most of you will definitely know this car. I must admit, I find the upscale and final model not bad at all. It's still a very well balanced and proportioned design, albeit a little less dramatic than the first designs. The Boattail magic is also still there. The car looks good from many angles, the front, the side, and of course, especially the rear and the rear quarter view. But have you ever noticed that it only starts to look weird from this angle? It's almost like the rear fender is dislodged from the rest of the body, just sticking too far out. Also, every time I talk about the Brougham era and the many American cars that like to adopt styling cues from cars of the 1930s, I always include the Riviera because of the Boattail. But upon reflection, it's not a full-on Brougham-mobile, because that would mean that it would certainly have a waterfall grille of some sorts on the front. But it doesn't. So that makes this Riviera unique. It's more Bill than Brougham. On a scale of a sporty Corvette to, let's say, I don't know, a Brougham-tastic Lincoln Mark III, the Riviera is a solid Riviera, with a front-end design looking to the future and a rear-end design pointing to the past. Bill, in the meantime, held grudges against GM management, bitter by the fact his original idea didn't went through. So what did he do? He ordered a Riviera for himself and had it customized, nicknamed the Silver Arrow 3. To make this car, he lowered the roof and changed the C-pillar so that it looked more like the original design, and he used it as his personal car. To add insult to injury, besides half the design department thought that the styling of the Riviera was too radical, the buying public agreed. Sales for the 1971 model year were even lower than that of the year before, and weren't really climbing in the next couple years. Not even the advanced Max Track option, which was an early version of traction control, persuaded buyers. By 1973, the safety measures started to roll around, and so the 5-mile-per-hour bumpers pretty much ruined the front-end design.
It's probably one of the best personal luxury cars on the road. And that luxury is spelled with a capital L.
It's 1974, and one could argue if the Boattail Riviera was a failed experiment. The redesigned 1974 Riviera took a more neutral approach. It had styling that was pretty common for the day and shared much of its body lines with other Buicks and GM cars. The Boattail was completely gone, but replaced by a trunk that has a slight hint of a bustle back, just to give it a little extra, and maybe it had to compensate for something. It was a sneak peek of what was yet to come by the end of the 1970s, and if you want to know more, Riviera sales trudged along until the 1979 model year. A new downsized generation came around that was actually quite successful, but the Riviera was pretty much a corporate cousin of the Cadillac Eldorado and Oldsmobile Tornado, as these cars weren't bad sellers either. The final generation of the Rivieras came around in 1995. Although the car has the typical bubbly, soft and round 1990s styling, if you look closely you can see the car tries to capture the magic of the original Rivieras. It's a large and high-styled coupe with unique taillight treatment. The cars were powered by the venerable 3.8-liter V6s, which could be supercharged to get as much as 240 horsepower. Once again, the car borders on being a Grand Tourer. But coupes were on their way out, and the car, and therefore the entire Riviera nameplate, was discontinued in 1999. Bill, in the meantime, retired in 1977, a year with one of the lowest Riviera sales, if that's even worth mentioning. Bill went out with a bang with another Mitchell-mobile, the 1977 Pontiac Phantom concept car. Something of a Corvette meets Riviera, but with modern headlamps. Typical Bill styling, but with this time, no Boattail. If you wish to know more about cars with bustleback styling, click the video in the top left. If you wish to know more about the general history of personal luxury cars, like the Buick Riviera, click the video in the bottom left.